Darren Urban, T-minus 1 week and counting until the NFL Draft 2021. How shocked will you be if the Cardinals don't go cornerback?
I'll be honest, Paul. That's really, for me, it's kind of impossible to answer right now, just because of I don't know who's on the board. Everything is pointed that way for such a long time. That kind of stuff scares the heck out of me when only one position stands out so much that you're going to spend a first-round pick on it. Okay, if you're picking really high and you're going after a quarterback, that's a little different of a situation. But if you're picking in the middle of the first round and you're super locked into one position, that scares me.
Well, you brought it up last week. The second-round pass rusher out of UConn.
What was his name? Cody Brown.
Cody Brown. They forced it.
Yeah, they forced that, and it's you can't be in that position. And again, this is what Steve Keim has spent the offseason trying to do is not have those holes. That's why he did it last year with the guys he signed in Campbell and Jordan Phillips. And that's what he tried to do mostly this offseason with the guys he signed. And he even signed a cornerback. The problem with they have at cornerback is that they really had nobody. I mean, Patrick Peterson wasn't the only one that's not around anymore. You don't have Drake Kirkpatrick. You just have Byron Murphy and an unknown in Robert Alford. And that's what's so scary at this point with this whole thing. So will I be surprised? I'll put it this way, Paul. If there's a guy on the board, I will be surprised if they don't take him a little bit. But it also will tell me a lot. If Horn and Surtain are off the board and Farley's the guy and he's sitting there at 16 and they pass on him, I think that says more about how they feel about Farley in particular rather than wanting to go in a different direction, just because of Caleb Farley has had the injury issues, and Caleb Farley did not play in 2020, so he hasn't played in a football game since 2019. I mean, these are things that are, I would think, worry you a little bit. Now, are you in a position where, hey, if we can trade back to 23 and get Greg Newsome, that's fine. But if we can't trade back and you're going to take Greg Newsome in the first round anyways, would you just take him at 16? I mean, that's the other thing they've got to figure out. If he's your guy at 23, he still should be your guy at 16.
Look, if you have Surtain or J.C. Horn still lingering there at 13, 14, that's the scenario where I could see the Arizona Cardinals trading up a little bit, just a couple of slots up the board, make sure no one jumps in front of them to get their guy, one of those two guys. And I agree with you, Darren. I think it's the big two right now at cornerback, Surtain and J.C. Horn. I could see them maybe making a move up the board to nab one of those two guys. Otherwise, they're either standing at 16, Cal, or trading down if their guy isn't there.
No, I think that puts way too much value on these cornerbacks. I mean, that's your biggest need, but you've got a lot of other needs when you look beyond just 2021, and you guys aren't as on board with receiver, but I think if you're sitting at 16 and you can either trade up and get J.C. Horn at 13, or if you wait a Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith or somebody falls, give me the receiver 10 times out of 10 where you're not giving up draft capital to move up. So I think it's more likely that they draft somebody other than a cornerback in the first round, because I think Surtain and I think J.C. Horn will probably go before 16. I don't think they're going to trade up, and I don't think they're going to reach for a corner. And yeah, I mean, if Newsome or Farley or Asante Samuel or somebody is really highly ranked and they like them more than the consensus mock drafts, then that's fine. But I think in the first round, you go with the best player available no matter your need, because it's important for the long-term health of the franchise to hit on that pick, because hey, you got Greg Newsome or whoever, don't mean to use him as a bad thing, but if the guy doesn't work out, it doesn't matter that you picked a cornerback because you needed a cornerback. I don't think that's a good way to go into a draft.
I first of all, I agree with you, Kyle, with the idea that I don't see them trading up. I don't have a problem with them taking a receiver if they think he's the best guy at 16. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if that's the direction they want to go, I mean, at this point, beyond DeAndre Hopkins, after the season, who's your receiver? Kirk's going to be up. You still don't know anything about Isabella. AJ Green's on a 1-year deal. I have no problem getting a young receiver that you think could be ultra talented. I don't have a problem with that. There's other places I wouldn't mind looking. So it would depend on how your board is. And again, when we start talking about best player available, don't forget, and this is very real, that when they rank their board of the best players or the tiers that they have for where all these guys fit, need matters. Need is factored into this whole thing in terms of how they have them ranked. So you're gonna not necessarily just go way off the reservation with, and I can't even. The thing is you can't even think of a player right now that they have so many of that you wouldn't want to take them.
Yeah, I mean, I get it at quarterback. Obviously,
Yeah,
even if you like a quarterback, you're not taking him because you're not using that draft capital. But I get the need perspective, but I would still, if I'm drafting at 16, I would just go straight favorite player on the board, because I think where they're at with their long-term needs, it's just so vast that I think any player that you think is a Pro Bowl caliber player, you just grab them and you figure it out.
If I'm sitting there at 16, the corners are gone. Pass rusher is gone that you think is worth it at 16. And I'll get to that position group in a minute, what Drew Grigson told us in the Big Red Rage, the director of player personnel. But I'm sitting in there at 16 and your best option is receiver, I'm trading down. Absolutely trading down in the name of Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy last year. I don't care if Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle are there at 16. I'm moving down to 20, 23. I'm getting a nice asset in return. You don't have a third rounder. You don't have a fourth rounder, whatever that commands. I don't care. And then I'll take my receiver there. The position group is deep enough. You might not get the guy you were thinking at 16. That's the way I would approach receiver here based on the lack of return on investment the last few years at that position.
Okay, so my question then is, if the receiver group is so deep that you can wait till later to get one, why would somebody trade up to get a receiver when they can also wait and get somebody later?
Well, let's say maybe a quarterback is still on the board at that point. I'm not saying that the team trading up is going after receiver, but they might have a different need that.
So you're counting on somebody wanting to move up, though.
Right.
That's the thing.
I'm working the phones. Any takers who want 16? Let me hear your best offer. You've got 7 minutes.
Okay, so here's
my approach.
Here's the question then, Paul. You work the phones. You don't get, either they're asking you to go from 16 to 30 and you don't like it, or you can't get any takers and you're on the board with 16 and the corners are off the board and the best player on your board is a receiver. You're still not taking a receiver?
That receiver better be a significant margin ahead of any other player available on my top 120. That would be my answer to that.
You're getting way too caught up in the statistical noise of recent first-round receivers not playing well. I mean, if you had a bigger sample size or anything like definitive that receivers always are less productive than their draft stock, that's fine. But I think 1 or 2 or 3 years of, you're talking about maybe 10 wide receivers in total, and judging this year's draft class off of what they did, I think will just put you in a bad spot. I think it's all about the evaluation of the prospects. I mean, we've seen Odell Beckham come in and light things on fire, and Mike Evans and Julio Jones was a first-round pick, Justin Jefferson. I mean, there's plenty of first-round wide receivers that have been great, and there's plenty that have busted, and it's probably about the same bust rate as every other position, because if there was a clear data out there that a certain position is not worth it in the first round, those players would move down, and they have at running back, and that's been kind of borne out. But I don't think that's the case at receiver. I think that position is becoming more important as we become a passing league. So once again, if my top rated guy is a receiver at 16, I would definitely take him.
This is just my thought, and I don't have the data at my fingertips. If you had zoom out to 10, 15, 20 years, I would agree with you. Last 5 years? No. If you go back to the lack of success in first-round receivers the last 5 years, so you're right. I am basing it on that. Perhaps I'm putting too much stock in that. I will say, though, that running back, to me, is a good comp for the receiver position. I do think of the receiver position right here, right now, akin to running back, unless the guy is Adrian Peterson I'm not going top 10 at that position. I'm just not. So you're right. We do have a difference in opinion on that one.